Casual Diary Podcast, episode 358.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other CashFlow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast. My name is Jay Massey, your host, and I'm glad that you are here today. Here's why. Because you guys know, if you've been listening for any length of time, that I've often said one of the things that I think gives certain entrepreneurs an advantage is to actually play an instrument or artists as well as athletes. I think we in those categories have a unique advantage. And that simple advantage is that 1, you've practiced, 2, you know how to fail, and 3, you know how to get right back up and do it again. And well, I have with me today someone who's likely to expound not only upon that, but so many more things as it relates to understanding the process of becoming something that you may not be today, i.e., you want to become an entrepreneur. You want to build that cash flow. You want to go from 7 to 8 figures or maybe 6 to 7 figures or, like Jay, I'd just be happy with any figures. Totally understood. But to make that shift requires all of us to change. So what does that mean? That means today you're going to be listening to none other than Thomas M. Sterner. He's the author of multiple books. The one you may know already is called The Practicing Mind. He's got a new book out called Fully Engaged, where you get to learn how to use the practicing mind in everyday life. He's been on many different places, from Fox News to Forbes. He's worked with high school athletes to senior executives. But what's important for you to understand today, he is the go-to person for what is called present moment functioning. And you're like, Jay, what's that? Well, we're going to find out together as we talk to Thomas M. Sterner. Tom, you there?
I am there.
Great. Totally appreciate you being there right now. So this being your first time here, I got to ask you the same question that I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. Are you ready?
I am ready. Fire away.
Awesome. All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. And I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them is that, occasionally as entrepreneurs, we envision ourselves, we actually do get dressed up in tights and capes, but we go around using our special skills and abilities, improving the lives of our customers with our products and services. Also, like superheroes, entrepreneurs have a beginning. If you think about Spider-Man, for example, he was originally just a college student, taking photos for the paper, trying to make the ends come together. And one day he gets bit by a spider. Special ability happens, and he has to choose how he is going to use it to improve the life of people around him. Now, my question to you, sir, is, before everything that you're known for, be it The Practicing Mind, The Fully Engaged, your new book, which, is doing well and all of those great things, before being on television, before all the work that you have done, my question is who is Thomas M. Sterner?
Well, let me see if I can put that in a nutshell. I've always been a very contemplative person. I play several musical instruments, so I have that in my background. I've always enjoyed singular type activities, meaning in high school and part of college, I was a gymnast. I have a pilot's license. I am very much interested in golf, particularly from the mental end. But one of the things that I like about golf is that everything is up to you. I mean, you practice, you deal with all the stresses on the course. It's not a team sport, although we do have the Ryder Cup. But I mean, in general, it's considered an individual sport. I like things where I'm in control of how far I go, which is why I was always self-employed. When I was a teenager, I worked for some people and I didn't feel like I was appreciated. And I felt like no matter how hard I worked, I never seemed to get ahead. And I thought, if I'm going to put this kind of effort into something, I want it to be directly related to the rewards of it. So at 19, I started my first business, even when I was in college. And so I've always worked by myself. And besides that, the jobs that I've had have all been very singular, meaning I was a piano technician, a concert piano technician, a concert piano rebuilder for over 25 years. And my day was spent pretty much in solitude. And they were long days because I was fortunately very successful at it. So I spent 10, 12, 14-hour days by myself, alone with my thoughts and whatever process that I had to work at. So but I always enjoyed that. So that's really, I'm someone who enjoys working by myself, figuring things out. And that's why I have had the time to both research what we'll talk about today, but also to contemplate it in myself.
Got it. Okay. So there's a lot of things there. First of all, by the way, I did never know there was such a thing or a way to work on a piano for 14 hours a day. That's like a new thing, new concept to me right there. Like, what could you possibly do to a piano that requires 14 hours a day of work? But clearly there's demand. And that's what I like about entrepreneurship. You just never know what you're going to learn when you ask the question. But let me ask this. You said several musical instruments, gymnast, pilot's license, golf. You mentioned the number of things. Someone listening might go, wow, is this guy like 90? How on earth does he have time to get good at and do these and explore all of these things?
That's something that's been said to me over and over again. People, I routinely get asked, is there anything you don't do? I mean, I sew, I've done I've sailed, I've had sailboats. I guess I just love to learn. And because I enjoy the process of accomplishing any goal, it's never for me, taking on a goal, I always know I'm going to accomplish it, and I always know I'm going to enjoy the process of accomplishing it. So I take on whatever comes by me that I think is going to be interesting, and I just integrate it into my life.
Interesting. So now I have to ask the question, because you said two things very definitively, two things that a lot of people question. One, you said, I know I'm going to accomplish it. And then you said, I know I'm going to enjoy the process. Most people I know wonder, am I ever going to get there? And a lot of people I don't like the process of the things that we go through as we change and transform ourselves. So you help me understand, where did that certainty come from for those things?
Well, the certainty, Jay, came from actually accomplishing this stuff. But I think what you have to really understand is that one of the things that we're trained to do in our culture is to become very attached to the moment we accomplish our goal. And what that does is it steals our motivation for being absorbed in the process of achieving the goal. Because we have this sense.
Hold on. That was heavier than my brain was ready to receive. So we say that again, maybe a little bit slower so I can understand the nuance you're making there. We're attached to the moment?
Yeah, we become very attached to the moment that we accomplish the goal. Now, that goal may be acquiring something or accomplishing something. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, it immediately puts us at war with the process of achieving it, because we have this sense of, I'm incomplete where I'm at now, and this feeling I'm experiencing is not going to go away until I cross the finish line.
I see.
And so then everything in between there becomes, we have a tendency to experience as a sense of struggle, because we're constantly measuring, well, where am I now on the ruler of here to the goal? Where am I now? I've got to get to the goal. And we completely lose the experience of achieving the goals, which ironically are what make the goal so such an experience of joy. I mean, if you look at somebody running a race, It only takes a second to cross the finish line. What makes the race of value? What makes it feel of value when you cross the finish line? It's everything that it took to cross the finish line. It's all the training that went in, the discipline that it took, the times you ran laps around the track. And then in the race, it's disciplining your mind to push a little harder. All these things, that's what makes the moment you cross the finish line of value and makes it the experience what it is. If I just drew a line 2 feet in front of you and said, there's the finish line, go cross it, it would mean nothing. It's the experience that we go through to actually have that moment. And in business and in so many areas of our life, we don't engage ourselves in that because all of the marketing media is constantly telling us, until you have this car, until you're doing this, life is passing you by. And so for me, I think the difference is when I choose a goal, it's very exciting because I know I'm going to go through this period of accomplishing it, and I'm looking forward to that.
Interesting. If I could, restate that, basically what I hear you saying, or at least what I think I hear, you can confirm, is you're saying that any of us who have been practicing or living that way, we're shortchanging ourselves from the entire experience. You're saying the best part actually comes before crossing the finish line almost.
Absolutely. And the finish line means nothing without the race. So I think that, but again, that whole mindset is fostered in us from the time we're children. I mean, I have done talks at colleges where it's to try to teach the kids to enjoy the process of educating themselves instead of just get the grade, but aren't we taught that from a very early age? It's the grade. I mean, we get these things where people say, just do your best, but that doesn't mean anything because if you get a D, they don't want to hear you did your best. They know you didn't do your best, because you wouldn't have gotten a D if you did your best. So that's what I mean. We're constantly this idea of the end result is what matters. And the process of achieving it is just something you have to go through. And when we break out of that and we begin to focus on this moment right now and absorb ourselves in this process, all of a sudden, all of that drops away. And what's interesting is that all of the studies we've done in sports psychology and all these peak performance studies have shown that we operate at our highest level when we are completely absorbed in the present moment. And our experience of what we're accomplishing is completely different. Yeah, our experience goes way up. And what we do is, as I've said many times, is we accomplish more in less time with less effort. And our experience of accomplishing it is one of contentment. Anxiety drops away because you always feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. And why are we more productive then? Well, for one, we have access to our total consciousness because our brain is only working on what's in front of us. And so our thoughts thin out. All these things begin to happen. And it's so far removed from where we are in our culture, where we're overstimulated through digital media and the constant attachment to what's going to marketing and media and all those types of things. And so there's interestingly, someone pointed out an article that was in USA Today recently, and they've done these studies to finding that, and I've been saying this for a long time, that our ability to focus is dropping and getting shorter and shorter and shorter because we're not asking our brain to do that. We're asking our brain to do all these things simultaneously and not focus on one thing at a time. And the article stated that these studies have shown that our attention span has been dropping, and at this point it's below that of a goldfish for the average person in terms of how many seconds we can actually stay focused on one thing. And it's not very long. It's, I don't know, 8 or 9 seconds, something like that, which is pretty pathetic. And it's going to get worse unless we really start to pay attention to correcting this and taking our brains in a different direction.
Did you say less than a goldfish?
Less than a goldfish. Isn't that really sad?
We're in trouble on this podcast already then. All right. So with that being the foundation, let me ask this question, because maybe this is what you're saying, because I'm thinking about, a number of people either in the CashFlow Diary community, a number of people who are listening right now, a number of people, because we make these decisions at times that say, hey, I'm going to go become this new thing. I want to start this business, but instantly or often a sense of overwhelm or can hit because there's this process and feeling of uncertainty, so to speak, which is usually not tied to anything that you said about enjoying the process. So how does one begin to associate, realign these associations such that when it's like, hey, I want this goal, and be able to go, all right, I get to go learn. How does that happen? How do we make that change?
Well, the fundamental thing that has to happen is you have to change the way you think in order to change the way you experience. And you can't change the way you think if you're not aware of what you're thinking. And most people are not aware of what they're thinking. Their mind is producing thoughts all day based on what is stimulating them. And as that is happening, they're just completely absorbed in their thoughts. And they experience all the emotional content that goes with that particular thought. Our mind is a problem-solving machine, and it's very good at it. The problem is that if we don't give it something to work on, it will go looking for something. They talk about this in sports psychology. They call it, going into search mode. And so what ends up happening is the mind gets bored very easily with the present moment, so it wants to run out. And I think part of that is stimulated by the fact that we have way too much on our plates. So the mind wants to go out. When you're working on like a report or something, your mind's saying, okay, well, you got that covered, so I'm going to go run out here and start trying to figure out what we're going to do with this and that and this and that. And so there's all of this internal dialogue that's going on and all this calculating that's going on, and you have very little access to what is actually your actual computational ability. But getting back to your point is that the starting point is we have to become aware that we are not our thoughts, that we are the one that experiences our thought, and that once we begin to become aware of that, we can begin to decide what thoughts our mind is going to produce. And when you do that, then you can make decisions on what you're talking about there. For example, we tend to, when we feel like we're struggling, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur, and then we step into it and we're like, oh my gosh, I feel this is overwhelming. When you have that feeling, and that's just a feeling, we can label it struggling, but it's just an experience of a feeling. It's an indicator to you that you are up against a personal threshold. And that means that you are busting through a personal threshold. You're right up against there. The things that you already know how to do, the situations that you're very good at dealing with, you don't notice because you're a master at them. It's when you get up against a situation that makes you feel like you're struggling, that's when you know, oh, this is my opportunity to push forward. And you're not supposed to know everything that you have to do in order to master that situation the first time through. You're in a place where you're gathering data. And if you can just begin to see the situation that way, it completely changes your experience of that moment and also your ability to perform in that moment, because you don't have all this background noise of anxiety and judging and overthinking going on, because you look at the situation very objectively as it is, and then you begin to control your thought, and you can learn to enjoy that situation, because you can say, this is my opportunity. I'm up against the threshold here. I'm up against a personal, here's my chance to have a personal best, as they say in track, just try to get a personal best. Here's my opportunity. That's why I'm feeling this way. And when you can separate from that and see it from that perspective, your experience of that completely changes, and it really does empower you.
Interesting. So you said something there that I just want to make sure that people heard, because you said, we're not supposed to know everything your first time through. Why do we feel the opposite?
I think we're just misled to feel it because, again, it's because we're taught that until we're not taught mastery in our culture. If you look at just what the way that commercials are what are played in front of our eyes all the time, it shows the guy driving the $50,000 sedan. It never shows him working his way up to buying the $50,000 sedan. I mean, I look at sailing magazines and they show these people that are in their late 20s sailing on these $750,000 boats. How many people like that are out there? But I mean, the concept, and like even if you go into the beer commercials, like the old Miller time, it's like nobody's working; they're all walking off the job to go have a good time. It's always the climax that is being put out there, and the concept of working for things is not promoted to us, and that's why I think that we have this feeling of life is passing us by because we haven't accomplished this idea that we have. And they see this more and more with the younger people that are coming up, is they're so impatient, quote, for success. But I tell people, I've worked with young golfers and done clinics, and I've said, what do you do when you're playing a golf game or a video game and you master it? And they always yell out, I get rid of it and get another one. I said, that's right. Why is that? I said, because you don't like it when it's easy. You want something to be a challenge. That's the way we are. We want a challenge. And when something is easy, we become very bored and we immediately move to the next level. That's what we want. But we don't recognize that. That's when people want to become an entrepreneur, it is a process, and it's a process of learning. And in the beginning of any process, the one thing you have to understand is you can't have all the data that's necessary to make all the decisions because you don't have the experience. It takes going through certain situations over and over again to really accumulate the data to begin to get experience. I mean, that's what we always talk about. We want to work with somebody who's been there before. Why is that? Because they already know the answers because they've been there before. This is the kind of thing that I work with when I'm working with people, is to get them to change the way they approach personal growth, and also to see the wake behind the boat. That's the other thing is, what happens is as they move down the road and they're expanding personally, they're always looking ahead. And so that what they see ahead is always changing, which is what it's supposed to do. And they forget to look behind them to see how far they come. And, here's a silly story that I've told many, many times, but it really does demonstrate what we're talking about. It was a woman that contacted me who had left a corporate job like so many other people, and she wanted to start a career as a visual artist. Mm-hmm. And she called when the very first session. I said, what do you feel like you're struggling with? And she said, well, the main thing is that I've been at this for 6 months trying to build this visual artist career and studying visual artwork. And she said, and I'm not as good as I should be. So I asked what I thought was kind of an obvious question. Well, how good should you be? And it stumped her. And she said, I don't really know. And I said, well, if you don't know how good you should be, how do you know you're not better than you should be for somebody who's been doing this for 6 months? And she said, I never thought of it like that. I don't know that either. And I said, well, if you could do all the stuff that you know now, all this information and skills that you've acquired now, I said, if you had them 6 months ago, would your perspective have been that you were really good? And she said, oh yeah. I said, so it's not that you're not moving forward, you're not expanding, you are getting better. What is changing is your perspective of how good you can be, what your capabilities are. I said, that's changing as you move down this road of learning and skill building. And I said, isn't that always going to be the case? So learn to look behind and see the wake, and learn to be content with the fact that you are growing in every minute that you're working at this. These are the kind of perspective changes that you have to make default. You have to teach people for these to be their default reaction to situations, so they lose this sense of a feeling like they're struggling in this moment.
Interesting. So then that would also apply to the concept of what you said earlier, that I'm feeling these things because I'm up against a personal threshold. So for example, I know for myself, I was actually just having this conversation with a group of friends last night, that one of the things that always has consistently been a challenge for me is the concept of planning an organization. My default is, okay, let's get it done and just start, before I step back and plan any strategy, etc. Fortunately, I can surround myself with people who do that, but I still think there's a level of that I need to grow to myself. With that being said, I've purchased more planning systems than I care to admit, and have tried to become that more and more and more, but it seems to be this personal threshold. And I've been thinking about it again, going, but I'm not exactly, I'm trying to put that in the framework of what you're talking about so I can maybe enjoy the process and experience something completely differently than what I have before. So as a real example, help me put that into perspective, or have this perspective change that you're referring to.
You know, it's funny. Perspective changes come in many different forms at many different times and for many different reasons. Hopefully, you've had more than one perspective change as you've continued to listen, and we definitely appreciate that. But here's the question. How has your perspective changed recently? What do I mean by this? I simply mean, for those of you who have been doing business for a while, for those of you who have been thinking about business, maybe for the first time, do you realize that your perspective on many things will change, i.e., you will become a different person through this process? Now, if you want to continue to become a different person, one of the most important things that I have learned, it's called staying in the conversation. That means you keep pushing forward every day with the same conversation. That way you can stay and keep that momentum going, because it can be tough to build. And if you've got the mo right now, that's momentum, make sure that you keep it going by going to grab a copy of my book, Cashflow Diary, 10 Steps to Creating Wealth in Any Economy. Go over to cashflowdiary.com/free book. Now, let's get back and hear the rest of this story.
Well, if I was talking with you on a weekly basis, for a couple of weeks, I would have a better handle on everything that you've done. But one of the things, you clearly have gathered a lot of information about what doesn't work. And I don't know if you're really seeing that, but, who was it? Thomas Edison that said something like, I haven't failed. I've learned all the ways that don't work. I'm paraphrasing it, but that is a famous quote. And I think that one of the things that someone would have to really make you put in your face is, look, you haven't wasted anything. You have learned all these things that don't work for your particular personality. Mm-hmm. And you have, let's define practice, because I talk about this in the Practicing Mind. Practice is the repetition of a specific action with a conscious intention of accomplishing something. And isn't that what you're doing? You are repeating different types of organizational procedures with conscious intention of finding the one that works for you. And you can't know that when you start out. Now, if you were to coach somebody in that, you would probably be very good at it, because it's an area that you have personally focused on. And you could say, they could ask you questions about that. And you could say, well, I tried that. Let me tell you what the shortcomings are of that. Let me show you what the strong points of this are. All this data that you have gathered, that has all gone in there. It hasn't been wasted. It's like, when you practice the piano, there are no bad practice sessions. Some days your hands work and some days they don't, but I remember my piano, when I was studying jazz piano, the guy said, the reason you practice is so that your worst performance is acceptable. So, wow. That's really what you're doing is you just keep gathering this data and you're finding out. You'll probably come up with a hybrid system that is really parts of different systems that works best for you. But you can't know that when you start out. There's just no way for you to know that. So that's normal. That's the thing. That's absolutely normal. But see, you started out with an expectation of, well, I'll do this, and because I'll do that, it'll all work. And then that didn't work. And you go, well, you get frustrated and you go, well, that didn't work. So let me try this one over here. One of the chapters in Fully Engaged is setting goals with accurate data. Because when you don't have accurate data, you begin to judge your progress. And most of the time, very unfairly.
Interesting. Okay. So there's this word that we've used a couple of times, practice. And I find it interesting, like physicians, they call their work a practice. Musicians, they go to practice. Athletes practice. Artists, practice. There's lots of the concept of practice. Yet, when I go to become an entrepreneur, and a lot of the people that we work with, they're literally wrapped around the concept of, I've got to get it right and can't fail there's no room for practice. And I'm trying to understand here, where does that thought process come from? And more importantly, what could an entrepreneur gain by developing the concept of I'm practicing, like this is my practice business, so to speak?
Well, the examples you gave are interesting because, practice is both a verb and a noun. A lawyer has a practice, but he practices law.
Right.
A doctor has a practice, but he practices medicine. I think that what happens is when people, again, in our culture, it's hammered over and over again that the goal, and we have these goals, which I think are really kind of interesting. And like somebody says, all right, I want to be an entrepreneur. And they usually they're leaving a corporate job, they're discontented, and now they've got this idea for this thing that they want to do. And so they've started from a place of discontentment because they've left a position. And then they start this new business. And now they're needing, in some way, they're needing for something to happen positive in a fairly short period of time. And so they become attached to this specific goal. So I'll give you two examples I think that are good with that. One is if you say, and this is one I've used because it's easy for anybody to understand. If you say, I want to lose 30 pounds, that should take me 10 days. That's a goal with that inaccurate data.
What?
Now, we all know that isn't going to happen.
Right.
But in an entrepreneurial state, we make goals that are just that ridiculous, but we just don't know it because we don't have enough information. So what ends up happening is even if you're doing everything absolutely correct and you're moving at an accelerated rate, 7 days into this 10-day weight loss program, you might be 8 or 9 pounds down. And you're going to be, your perception and your interpretation of that is going to be, I'm not very good at this, I'm a failure. Your confidence is going to go down, all because you're measuring your rate of accomplishment based on inaccurate data. And that's the first thing I think entrepreneurs really need to understand. And they need to understand, as we said earlier, initially, you may not be able to have all the information. There are certain things that are going to have to happen, certain opportunities that are going to have to come up. You're going to have to think through them, and you're going to have to find what works and what doesn't work. And there's no shortcut to it. You can help it by hiring people that are highly skilled in specific areas to try to help you with that. But here's another example. In the Practicing Mind, I told a story about how in the 1970s, I was into target archery at one point, and there was a story in one of the magazines about the Olympic archery coach who, now this is back then, it's not a problem now, but back then the Americans were just not competitive against the Asians. And the reason was because the Asians were very present moment, process oriented, because that was the difference between the American culture and their culture. The American culture was obsessed with getting bullseyes. So it was almost like you get 3 shots in these archery competitions. So for the Americans, it was almost like the reason you put the arrow in the bow and you drew the bow was a nuisance you had to go through to let it go to see if you got a bullseye. Whereas the Asians were focused on the process of drawing the bow, and they were completely absorbed in that, and they would let the arrow go, and the target would just get in the way. And the Americans would, they'd shoot this arrow, and as soon as the arrow missed the mark, they would begin judging this process. And it was like they were in a hurry to shoot the next arrow because they wanted to see if they could make up the mistake they had on the first shot. Whereas the Asians just kept thwack, 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 3 in the bullseye. And the American coach, was saying it was so frustrating because he couldn't get these archers to let go of getting the bullseye and be more focused on this process of drawing the bow, which would create the bullseye. They're very different perspectives. And that's another thing that holds us back in our culture. And now, virtually, this is everywhere in sports. Whether it's in golf, everybody is involved in focusing on the process. You hear them talking about it all the time, whether you're watching an NBA game, a football interview, golf, everybody's focusing on that because they realize that it's what works. You can say, well, yeah, but I don't want to do that. Well, then don't do it. But this is what works. We know what works. You can choose not to do it, but this is what works. And so I think that those are things that we need to, that people need to work at.
Would that be, in essence, the definition of present moment functioning?
Yes, that's a very good definition. You know, when you are completely absorbed in the process of what you're doing right now, what is in front of you right now, you're not attached to the future. You have to have the goal, because the goal is what steers you. If the archer doesn't have a target, they're just shooting the arrow in the air. I mean, they have to have the bullseye because they want to know where to aim. But when they become fixated on the bullseye, then they're not noticing what they're doing now to get the arrow in the bullseye. And what happens is they create more work and anxiety and all these things that have absolutely nothing to do with getting the arrow in the bullseye. They just make the experience of shooting the arrow miserable.
Okay. All right. So having practiced many different things myself, from a free throw shot to handwriting to my own music creation to business to all kinds of different things, one thing I do know for certain is that occasionally, yes, we get discouraged. I get discouraged from the things, not seeing these results like you're talking about. And that can cause one to disengage from that particular, activity or saying, you know what, maybe that goal just ain't worth it no more. Your new book is called Fully Engaged. I'm assuming it has something to do with hopefully getting some of that back, or how do you maintain that engagement level when we'll say the euphoria is gone?
Well, this is just a side story that's in some ways humorous, but I had somebody contact me because they wanted me to coach them. But when we got together, we actually met at a coffee shop because they were local. And what she told me was that she had broken up with this guy, and that she was, she didn't feel like, it was taking her too long to get over him, I guess. And I said, so you've read the book? And she said, what book is that? I said, well, you look it up in this book. And then when you look up in the book, it says, when you've been going out with someone for X amount of days, when you break up with them, it takes this many days, this many hours, this many minutes, this many seconds, and then you'll be over them. And she said, no, there's no book like that. And I said, if I were to tell you, and this is the point, if I were to tell you that it's April 30th. If I were to tell you that on November 22nd, you will be completely over this guy, absolutely completely over him. It won't matter whether you walk into him in the grocery store and think he will have absolutely no emotional effect on you at all. Would you be okay with where you are now? And she said, oh, absolutely. And I said, that's my point, is that what you're describing always comes from this feeling of we should be here. But where are we getting that information from? Why do we feel bad at progress? Because we have this idea of where we should be in our progression. We feel like I should be able to make 6 free throws in a row. Well, where are we getting that data from? Where are we getting that information from that's telling us that? Because most of the time it's false information that we haven't done any research on. So, to me, that's one thing that we have to be aware of, is that we are mastering whatever we're doing. But when we are in a process of mastering anything, George Leonard writes in his book Mastery that there is all this stuff that's going on underneath the surface that we're not aware of. And then what happens is when it blossoms, we jump up another plateau. So we start out here, and then we're just on this plateau for a long time. We're shooting free throws, we're practicing the piano, whatever we're doing. And anybody that has done sports or anything like that has experienced that, where it feels like there's this time frame where they just don't feel like they're getting any better. And then there's a point where all of a sudden they have this performance that kind of blows the gates off, and they're like, where'd that come from? Well, it's because it takes a certain amount of time for that to gestate. Now, that's one thing. But I think the most important thing that we haven't talked about is the concept of thought awareness training, because you can't have this conversation that we're having today if you're not aware of what you're thinking. In other words, as I said at the very beginning, if you want to change the way you react to situations, if you want to change habitual behavior within yourself, you have to be the observer of that and not the participant of it. There are two very different places to be. And the only way that you can do that is to learn to be separate from the thoughts that your mind is creating, because your mind is the one that's making these habitual decisions and behaving in this way. So you need to learn to be separate, to be more of an observer of what that's going on, so that you have the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm standing at a fork of the road. Right now I'm at a fork in the road, and I've got two ways that I can go. I'm experiencing this feeling like you were just discussing, like I'm feeling like quitting. I'm feeling like this goal is, I've had enough of working at this goal. That's a fork in the road. Now, you can go down the left, and if you can recognize, you know what, I've gone down that road many times. I know where it leads, and it's not a happy place. I'm not going to feel good tomorrow if I make that decision. If I could do anything I wanted right now, what would it be? I want to go down the road to the right. And if you need something to push you through that moment, but you also need to have the awareness that you're at that place and that you have a choice. And that's what thought awareness does, is it gives you the privilege of making a choice. So how do you get that? Well, there's only one way that I know, and that's through a process of just sitting still every day for 10 minutes. It doesn't take long. And either just sitting there, you can call it meditation. They're all just labels. Sit there and just watch, close your eyes so you don't have any visual stimulus, and put yourself in a place where, the phone's not ringing and people aren't walking into the room and asking you questions. And just sit for 10 minutes and watch yourself breathe, or just recite a phrase. I am successful. I don't care what the phrase is. It's just not something that's real long. And just recite this phrase and try to bring your mind onto that task. That's what you're going to do. I'm just going to recite this phrase. I'm very successful. I'm very successful. In your head, you're saying it. You're not saying it out loud. Or you're just watching your body breathe. Now, what is this going to do? Well, it's absolutely incredibly. It's just amazing what this does. And it does it very subtly without you trying, and you can't stop it from happening. What will begin to happen over a period of time, weeks, several, it just depends on the individual and how active your mind is. But you will begin to separate from your thoughts, and you will start to become the noticer of your thoughts. And you will really begin to notice this. This is interesting. I'm having a frustrated thought. There's a big difference between noticing a frustrating thought and being frustrated. People say, well, how do I get more patient? Well, you got to notice when you're being impatient, and you can't do that if you're just being impatient. So you'd have to notice when you're having an impatient thought. There's a pull. I'm having a pull towards being impatient. And they're very different places to be. And it's very powerful when you begin to develop that. You begin to be in control, and you have these choices. And what will happen when you do this is that let's just say you're following your breath. What will happen is the mechanics sound just so easy. Unfortunately, it isn't. What will happen is you'll sit there, your eyes are closed, you'll be just watching your body breathe. The temptation is to try to control the breath. You'll think like, well, this would be better if I took deep breaths. Don't do that. Your body knows how to breathe. It's so interesting that, when we start to pay attention, we start to try to control and just let it go. Just let your body breathe and just pay attention on the inhale, full attention. Watch your body inhale, watch your body exhale. What will happen very quickly is your mind will take off, and you will go with it, because you've gone with it your whole life. And there'll be an instant where you will wake up and you'll go, you know what, I'm thinking about what I got to do at the gym today. Or so, it'll be something like that. And you'll go, I'm not even noticing my breath. And that's where all the juice is. When that happens, you pull your mind back, you discipline it like a toddler in the toy store. You pull it back to the breath, and two things happen when you do that. One is your awareness of your thoughts goes up, that separation starts to happen, and the stamina, the mental discipline to pull it happens. Those two things happen. So when people say to me, I'm not very good at meditating, I'm not very good at this thought awareness training, I say, well, why is that? And they go, because I'm always chasing my mind. I said, well, that's like when you go to the gym, if you do a lot of reps, do you say, I didn't have a good workout today? I said, no. Every time you do a rep, you're gaining. And you have to understand that there are days when your mind is going to be very agitated because of what's going on in your life, and you're going to do nothing but chase your mind the whole 10 minutes. There's going to be other times when you're pretty cool and laid back, and you're going to feel like, I got this. I'm really pretty focused here. It's all normal. you're gaining every time you do it. But that really is what begins the process of separating from your thoughts and having the strength to direct them. So when you have these anxious thoughts or these feelings like I should be farther along, it'll be like you're watching somebody else say that. You won't be saying that. You'll be watching your ego, your mind, whatever you want to describe it, say this isn't where I should be. And you'll be watching it and you have this choice of, isn't that interesting? That has nothing to do with where I want to go and what I want to accomplish. So you're out of here. And it's that really is, you have to start there. And it's one of the things that it increases our attention span immensely because it teaches us to be in control of what our mind is doing.
Interesting. Is that the secret to remaining connected, engaged, and fully in making things like what we want happen? Is that what you're really, that's how we push through those forks?
Absolutely. Because you can't, you can have a difficult situation. Let's just make one up. There's a particular person you got to deal with that pushes your buttons. You can have I always teach people to have procedures, to sit down and recognize what are the situations that I tend to react in a way that I feel like I can react better. Because I tell myself and I tell other my clients, like, when you look at those situations, ask yourself, if I could behave any way I wanted, absolutely any way I wanted in this particular difficult situation, what would that be? Because most people don't even know that. They don't even know what it is. Like they just react in the situation. But if you say, okay, I got this person that comes in and gets in my face, okay, well, when that happens, if you could react any way you wanted to that person, what would that be? Figure that out so that you're not decision making when you're in that situation. Know what you want. And then you come up with a procedure for that so that when the person comes through the door, that's the trigger. That's the trigger to execute the procedure. But you can't do any of that if you're just absorbed in the reaction of this person coming in and pushing your button. So yes, it's the key to the prison door. It's what it makes you realize that you become proactive. You do not have to react. You are not your emotions. You can choose to have certain emotions. You don't want to shut off emotions of joy and fun and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes a little bit of anger, if it pumps you up in a situation that, like you see it in sports, I'm gonna run this last 100 yards. I'm gonna dig down deep, and you kind of get there's a little bit of anger there, that says I'm gonna do this. It's just you want to be in control of it and fully aware of what is going on. For the most part, these are things that we're not taught. I was always taught, well, your emotions are your emotions. You can't have any control of them. They're just your emotions, and that's so untrue and so disempowering. So, and as I said, when you do this, it's free. It takes no physical strength. Anyone can do it, and you can't stop the unfolding and the power that it will give you. It's just a natural result of doing it. And the only thing you have to learn is don't judge your practice. That's what people get into. Like they do it like they do everything else. Like, I want to have a still mind. My mind isn't still. I'm not very good at this. No, nobody, the yogis in the Himalayas don't have constantly still minds. That's why they work at this stuff, but they accept it. It's just the nature of the mind. So what you're doing is building awareness of what the mind is doing, and that gives you the opportunity to make a choice of this thought that is starting, this thought that is beginning now is taking me down a road that I know is not where I want to go. I'm not going to accomplish my goal. So you were talking about shooting free throws earlier.
Yes.
I've used the analogy of a free throw, a guy shooting free throws. He sets up, he shoots the free throw. Now that it's unfolding, it's short, it's long, it's left, it's right, or it goes through the hoop. He watches that, the ball comes down, he gets a second shot. Now, if he misses the shot and he slams the ball down, and we really needed, this was a 2-shot free throw, we really needed that. All that discussion, all that thought, all those thoughts that are being manufactured, they not only have nothing to do with putting the ball through the hoop the next time, they actually diminish his performance, and they make his experience of shooting the foul shots terrible. And that's what I'm saying is, That doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. I don't know how to make it any more clear. We know it doesn't work. So what we're talking about here is let's use what works. We've done all these university studies and everything, and this stuff has been around, Jay, for thousands of years. We know this is how we get to our highest level. So let's embrace it and engage it so we can start using it in our life and so in our businesses and in our family life and all those things.
Indeed, indeed. Here's what I have learned, that I think we have covered like 1/10 of 0.5%, if that, on this subject. Because the more you keep talking, I'm just like, man, there's a lot here. There's a lot here. So for those that are feeling like me, or those that want to find out more, what's going to be the best way for them to track you down, find out more what you're up to, maybe even get a copy of the book and begin their practice of these things, so that they can get better?
Well, they can get a hold of me. They can go to tomsterner.com. It's just TOMSTERNER.com. They can email me at tom@tomsterner.com. And if they go on that site, it's a pretty simple site that goes out into, there is a site called thepracticingmind.com that was started about like 5 years ago that is basically about that book. I also founded the Practicing Mind Institute, which is just you can join for free. It's and there's articles on there and blogs that have been written about stuff that I've talked about. I think there are some videos, but on the tomsterner.com site, that's really the home base, and there are recordings of like what we're talking about here. But like I said, there's access to my coaching page. All that sort of stuff is at tomsterner.com.
Awesome. I definitely want to just say you've got an immense amount of wisdom and understanding here that I think more and more of us want to become masterful at understanding and indeed practicing. So I definitely appreciate you taking the time and sharing your knowledge, insight, and wisdom here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
Oh, it's been an honor. I have really enjoyed, this is a wonderful show, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be here.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means tomsterner.com. That means like I know, you've been doing a lot of the things that we should not be doing, and we need to be able to have these changes. What did he call them? Perspective changes. You like that. Go figure it out, because we can become better versions of all of ourselves, whether that's in your parenting, whether that's on the basketball court, or whether it's in business. The whole point is you've got something that you want to improve. And I think we're learning, just beginning to learn even, how we can make that happen. It's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.